Hey guys, it's your favorite pilot, Cosmic Commander Cuckold, here to talk about the second best space sim out there, Elite Dangerous. Of course, it's nothing compared to the elephant in the room. You know what game I'm talking about. Ever since Elite Dangerous released back in 2014, it's been in the shadow of the colossal success of this insane competitor. Online pundits and commenters were chomping at the bit to criticize Elite Dangerous and just how empty and boring it was by comparison. A game so amazing that it didn't even need to exist yet. And a decade later, it still doesn't. That's right, it's the insanely fun to play Space Citizen. I gave it a try recently and I was so overwhelmed by how finely tuned and well crafted the game was that I couldn't even make it past the launcher. What a rousing success! 10 out of 10! The idiots at Frontier instead made a playable game, and they have been steadily adding content for a decade when they could have just had a buggy tech demo where they haven't even figured out how they're implementing basic mechanics yet. What a triumph!
Why are all these fucking explorer ships here? Tell them to fucking leave. Oh, wow. Wow.
What the fuck?
But I'm not here to talk about how much fun I had playing the Space Citizen launcher. Today I want to talk about my favorite part of Elite Dangerous. Ship combat. Specifically, bounty hunting. I'll cover the basics and intermediate general strategies later for anyone who's interested in possibly learning a few things from someone who has spent essentially all of their time in Elite Dangerous bounty hunting, but I figure what you want most are the builds. So I'm going to quickly go through my journey to my build so you can understand the mindset and reasoning behind it. That way you won't feel forced to copy and paste. You can take my experience and translate over into your own personal favorite ship and turn it into an effective bounty hunter of its own. The first thing when designing a ship, at least for me, is what weapons I'll be using to blow pirates. Of course, lasers are the only infinite ammo weapons out there, but they blow almost as hard as I do. I mean, they're great if you just want to go to some high security resource extraction site and rely on the NPCs to do the work while you just sit back and tag their targets, or just using them for their amazing shield wiping thermal damage and then relying on something else that uses limited kinetic ammunition for punching through armor, or by utilizing a specific build with the insanely inaccurate jittery half kinetic engineered burst lasers. But in general, by themselves they're awful at dealing with ships who have any sort of substantial hull, and you're not exactly saving time avoiding the need to rearm if your time to kill is in the dumpster. Enter the railgun, or more specifically, the plasma slug railgun. At the cost of only 10% of your railgun's damage, you can power this baby with nothing but fuel. Technically that's not infinite, but maybe you should stop being such a pedantic piece of shit and go straight to hell because you can just throw extra big ass fuel tanks onto your ship and shoot through literally thousands of pirates without having to refuel. Now allow me to take you on a journey through my trials and tribulations of wielding the awesome force that is the railgun. My first ever bounty hunting plasma slugging railgun touting ship I ever made was the Imperial Courier, a high class ship so overtuned that it's locked behind Imperial reputation. It's one of the fastest and most maneuverable ships in the game and is super shield heavy. A big plus for bounty hunting where you don't want to be taking chip damage to your hull with every protracted battle. On top of all that, it has count 'em, 3 medium hardpoints, the exact size we want for our railguns. This baby, let me tell you, oh boy is it a piece of shit. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but really, it's got its faults. Least of all the fact that it can barely carry any fuel.
I'm scared! Oh, I hear something. Something went in my butt.
Did you get fuel?
Something went in my other butt. I'm getting fuel right now. Atmosphere still hurts.
Okay, you should
There's
get
lasers!
There are people about to
Let me introduce you to the first big hurdle when dealing with railguns: heat management. A problem that's going to be all the more intense when you do the obvious thing and make them short range to nearly double their DPS but also jack up their thermal load. This baby can't handle 3 railguns with its 4A power plant and 3A distributor. It can't even handle 2 fired non-stop. The better your power plant, the more efficient you are with heat, and the better your power distributor, the faster you can refill your weapons capacitor. And you need to keep your weapons capacitor over 50% or you'll annihilate your ship with heat. That latter part is really where this ship falls apart. The Imperial Courier just doesn't have the recharge rate to handle 2 railguns, never mind whatever other weapon you'd be complementing it with in your third hardpoint. So you're down to only a single railgun, and even if you just try to use lasers with that, you're still overheating. Your only route is to use low draw and low heat, and that means conventional ammunition, not only limiting your ability to stay out fighting, but also forcing you to gimbal or turret them since your railgun is hit scan instead of leading in. It's simply not a great railgun ship, and certainly doesn't exploit infinite ammunition. Not to mention its tiny fuel tank and limited space had me accidentally blowing through everything I had and begging for help.
Oh, he is dead. Oh.
What?
I don't know how to feel the last shot! The last shot against the Anaconda! And I'm out of fuel.
So I did what everyone else does when they fail at making their own ship. I copied. Not that I followed a build or anything, but the Fer-de-Lance was the go-to, so I went to it. 4 medium hardpoints, perfect for railguns, with a huge hardpoint for something chunky to complement them. Given the heat and distributor draw of the railguns, the obvious choice being a gimbaled multi-cannon. Good for swatting small ships if you're having trouble lining up your railguns, paired with an experimental effect like corrosive shell that you can use to weaken tough hulls for your railguns to punch through. You'd eventually run out of ammo, but your 4 railguns are more than enough firepower without exploding your huge hardpoint at all. Some might say too much firepower, at least for the Fer-de-Lance. Unfortunately, its internals aren't up to the task of firing these railguns non-stop. Far from. You'll start overheating your ship very quickly and cook your modules unless you carefully pace your shots. Nevertheless, a build I personally enjoyed using for countless hours, especially with the incredible amount of shielding you can stack onto the Fer-de-Lance. But during one of my many bounty runs, I cooked my ship enough that one of my railguns began malfunctioning and eventually broke, which is when I realized just how much I was holding back with my railguns. How quickly they could fire when I only had 3 and barely had to worry at all about heat management, making me realize how little DPS difference there was between 3 firing non-stop compared to 4 staggering their shots to avoid a meltdown, which opened up a world of possibilities where I could swap out one of my medium railgun hardpoints for something else. But it also gave me another thought. What if there was a ship that could fire all 4 non-stop? One with a better power plant, a better power distributor. Which is when I started experimenting and I began to appreciate something called Hardpoint Convergence. Essentially, how closely all your hardpoints are grouped, how feasible it is to hit a single target with the fixed aim of railguns. You look at something like the AUSPEX Explorer and go,
oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Then you look at something like the Imperial Clipper and you start vomiting uncontrollably. And you really start to realize that it's not just about the power plant or the power distributor or the number of medium or greater hardpoints you have available to you on the ship. None of it matters if they don't all converge to hit the same target. So even without the fact that our short-range railguns make using a large ship awkward as we need to be fairly maneuverable even against NPCs, their universally terrible hardpoint convergence at the very least makes short-range railguns a poor choice. Enter the medium-sized Crate Mark II. That is some fine-ass convergence. On top of that, when compared to my old Fer-de-Lance, it has a great higher power plant, a great higher power distributor, and a fuel tank 2 grades larger, meaning even more insane amounts of ammunition for our railguns before we even consider the huge amount of extra internal compartments we have for even more fuel. And this baby can fit 5 railguns. I was absolutely in love. I abused this ship for so many hours. It was the best. I could fire 5 railguns even more consistently than my Fer-de-Lance could fire 4. It was a bit more cumbersome to fly, but its firepower more than made up for it. I felt like I could take on anything. Funnily enough, my biggest issue were the small ships as the crate handled too poorly to simply turn and face them as usual, forcing me to go into reverse so I could get an angle, a method that had plenty of drawbacks with the short range of my railguns. Still, I can easily say it was the best bounty hunting ship that I'd ever used. Fights that would make me wary of my Fer-de-Lance, my crate was conquering with ease. It was a pirate-slapping, underage drinking, credit farming machine, with one nagging issue. Just like my Fer-de-Lance, I felt like there was wasted potential. Where I previously couldn't non-stop fire 4 railguns, now my crate had a similar issue with its 5, constantly making me wonder how I could properly exploit that 5th hardpoint. Stuff like beam lasers were too draining for my power distributor, and having a corrosive multi-cannon like my Fer-de-Lance of old felt so much worse as I only had a large hardpoint, not the fantastic huge one, which led me back to the reluctant conclusion that, just maybe, the Crate Mark II wasn't the best pirate railer after all. So I went back to the shipyard with everything I'd learned and renewed my search with a fresh new perspective. And I saw a ship that I'd immediately written off. A ship that went against all conventional wisdom. The cheaper exploration model that any player would overlook in favor of the beefier combat model. Because the exploration variant wouldn't be better than the combat one, right? Right? Enter the Crate Phantom. Just saying the name of this ship makes me cum in my pants. The drawback from the Mark II, 1 fewer hardpoints, a hardpoint we couldn't properly exploit anyway. And what do we get in return? We're faster, and much more maneuverable, with better shields for having less power required for only 4 railguns. We even have a slightly better jump range. This ship is an absolute marvel and my pride and joy. I love it. It doesn't have quite the same opening salvo as its big brother, but after the first couple of shots their DPS evens out as the Phantom can fire its 4 railguns almost non-stop. And with it being so much more maneuverable, it can stick to targets way better, meaning it's landing more shots more often. It can better aim at power plants, and it doesn't need to be lethargically switching to reverse to get its nose in line with annoying smaller ships. It has taken my favorite bits of all my previous ships and put them together. The maneuverability of more nimble, medium-sized ships that let consistently stay in the blind spot of large ships like Anacondas and Corvettes. A hull slight enough that it can use the quick-charging bi-weave shields and still have the integrity to go through a deadly Fer-de-Lance assassination target without dropping shields, and sacrificing absolutely nothing when it comes to loading up fuel to power the most unmitigated damage per second of railguns that I've personally ever had the privilege of unleashing. It is, in my less than humble opinion, the best railgun wielding, pirate pegging, bounty farming, cosmic cocker on the market. So if you want a bounty hunt brandishing the incredibly satisfying railguns of Elite Dangerous, my personal top tier recommendation is the Crate Phantom. It is an absolute monster. I have never run into a situation I couldn't handle. I've never managed to find a ship that feels better or more effective. Though I'm guessing there's at least one person out there who's hearing all this and now feverishly comparing the Crate Phantom to their favorite railgun bounty hunter, the Python. They're on Coriolis looking at the stats, seeing just how similar they are, going, the Python is worth more, it gets more MILFs, it has more hardness, agility, hull, armor, shields, hardpoints, internals, and has identical modules. All the Phantom has is a bit of speed. How could it possibly be better? It's better because the Python handles like a drunk in a bathtub. Its flight model is so sluggish and painful to use that, back when I first started playing the game, as my first medium ship, it nearly convinced me that I'd never fly anything bigger than light from how awful it felt. The thing handles like an intergalactic short bus where the passengers have become the operators. Do not recommend. But hey, if you like it, I certainly won't stop you. Just let me go through the engineering and you'll probably want to copy every choice I make. And then, because it has identical modules to the Crate Phantom, you can buy one of them to try it out instead and feel its silky smooth, consistent handling and realize why I've given it the easy recommendation over the Python, which is like trying to control your wife's drinking habits after delivering her a decade of disappointment. Believe me, I would know! The railguns are easy, short range with plasma slug. The short range modification makes our 4 railguns hit with the damage of 7, and the plasma slug effect not only lets us use fuel instead of conventional ammunition, the whole reason we can effectively bounty hunt with the railguns in the first place, but also helps control the massive heat buildup of our weapons. Of course, you could always go long range if you wanted. A friend of mine turned his Crate Mark II because of the great Hardpoint Convergence into a railgun sniper, able to sit back up to a massive 6 kilometers from targets and pick them off. This is an especially effective build when in a wing with a friend or two, so you can swat down pirates as they circle your distant wingmates. Next up are the core internals, beginning with the hull. I personally just try to balance the resistances, putting on a reactive surface composite and engineering it with lightweight and deep plating. Then I pair that with 4 heavy-duty, deep-plated hull reinforcements, 2 5s and 2 3s. But honestly, I so rarely lose shields I could probably just be flying with no hull bonuses at all, so I have no strong opinions in this area. Then there's the power plant, low emissions with thermal spread. Max out that heat efficiency so your railguns can fire as often as possible and deal with the power headroom consequences later. If your particular ship seems to be handling its heat just fine or is too much of a glass can without the extra power for shield boosters, then armored is your next best bet. For thrusters, I always do them dirty with some drag drives. As much as we might be trying to mitigate heat, speed and maneuverability is absolutely not the place where I'd sacrifice anything. For the frameshift is magic, I go for performance. Increased range with deep charge. It doesn't matter how much extra power it uses since you can shunt it down to the last power priority on your ship along with your cargo scoop and other combat non-essentials like the interdictor and super cruise assist. It'll power off when you have your hard points out and it only takes 10 or so seconds for it to power back up automatically when you put them away. I put my life support to 4D to limit its weight and forget it exists. For the all-important power distributor, I always go for charge enhanced with super conduits. If our weapons capacitor is below half when we fire off our railguns, we're going to annihilate our ship with heat, so having it recharge as fast as we can spend it ensures that we never drop below that mark. And we certainly don't need our weapons capacity any larger with it regenerating to full between our salvos, so there's no need for weapons focused. Of course, we have 4 pips and weapons to control the heat, and being charge enhanced ensures that our shields will have all the recharge they need even when broken just from the 2 pips we can spare. We of course leave those in shields when under fire since each pip lends 15% resistances. Sensors can fill in where you need them to. You want to be able to spot pirates from a good distance away, so it's usually best to get an A grade and engineer them with lightweight to maximize your jump distance. But if you need the power headroom, you can also grab something like a D class and outfit with long range instead and be quite a bit heavier. I personally have a lightweight A grade on my Phantom since I don't have any use for the extra power. And finally, max out the fuel tank, of course. For shields, my methodology has always been to maximize resistances to make my effective defense as high as possible while minimizing my absolute strength to make recovery as fast as possible. Though the only thing worse than having you sit around waiting for your massive shields to come back online when you just want to keep playing the game is having your ship explode, so it's best to find a middle ground. That's why I reinforce a bi-weave shield with low draw. Then I fill up my utility slots with resistance augmented super capacitor shield boosters to maximize the amount of defense I'm getting from my small shields, save for one slot that I reserve for my kill warrant scanner. As for that scanner, I don't grab anything higher than a D, since even when it's that low, it significantly outranges my railguns. Then, as a massive quality of life addition, I engineer them to be fast scanning to cut that abysmal 10-second scan down to 2 seconds. And the best part about railguns is that all of them are on your left click, so you can always have the scanner occupying your right click. No need for swapping weapon groups except for when you're in Super Cruise and want to use your interdictor. And for the interdictor, I have no strong opinions whatsoever. Grab whatever you're comfortable with. If any of you are bounty hunters who have never used it, I'd recommend giving it a go. Super Cruise is typically filled with really juicy targets like anacondas and fertilizancers, giving easy mission targets with big bounty payouts. A nice little diversion if your resource extraction instance is getting quiet, you need to pop out to reset. I personally just use a 3A since I had nothing else specific for my 3 slot and I haven't had issues. The 2 slot leaves a perfect space for a module reinforcement, and the 1 slot is there for a Super Cruise assist when you're feeling lazy or just want to get a drink while ferrying back to your station to cash in all your missions. Other than that, I dedicate one of my 5 slots of fuel, bringing me to 64 tons. I don't get anywhere close to running out before I've completed the majority of my pirate missions when stacked correctly, which is when I want to be heading back anyway. Of course, if you want to be out there for hours on end, feel free to strip away some hull reinforcements and fill that up with even more fuel. And that's it! You've got yourself what I consider to be the best bounty hunter currently available, exploiting devastating plasma slug railguns with a big 30 light year jump distance to make traveling around convenient, shields that can survive just about any pirate onslaught and recharge in seconds, with enough speed and maneuverability to easily hunt any size of NPC ship. That said, if the Crate Phantom feels a bit too sluggish for you and you're really pushing for one of those super maneuverable ships, my personal recommendation would be the Alliance Chieftain. It's mostly the same build, but I need to engineer the power plant to be armored and stay have low emissions since it desperately needs the power for a trio of shield boosters. It also has 2 medium railguns and 3 smalls with an empty medium hardpoint since it's the least conversion of the 6 and the Chieftain can't handle the extra gun. It can't even handle the 5 that it has, so while it has a higher DPS on paper, it doesn't have the same heat mitigation of fire though at nearly the same rate as the Phantom. It also doesn't have the same general thruster speed of the Phantom, so despite its insanely fun maneuverability, it can still be difficult to hang in large ships' blind spots as they can simply outpace you before turning. With all that said, it's still my favorite maneuverable little railgun ship. Now let's quickly burn through the basics for really new players out there, if they even still exist. There are 2 layers to bounty hunting. The first is simply collecting the bounties themselves. All that's really required for that is to do a bit of damage to a wanted ship before it explodes. Meaning you don't have to do much, if any, of the real work. Whether it's another commander who eliminates them or a horde of system security NPCs, you'll get the full bounty. No splitting between everyone involved. If you do the tiny bit of damage required to be considered helpful for destroying a pirate with a bounty worth 80,000 credits, you'll get the full 80,000 credits along with every other player involved. Of course, you'll get an even bigger bounty if you scan them with a kill warrant scanner at any point before they blow up. And you'll get an even bigger bounty if you cash it in inside Arissa's exploited systems. And then you'll get an even bigger, morbidly obese, diabetic, infinifat bounty if you do it with her full favor. But that said, that's more of a combat zone farming setup. For bounty hunting, the bounties themselves are more of a perk. A solid bit of income on top of the massive payouts you get from the deluge of pirate massacre missions handed out by minor factions. Finding an optimal hunting ground isn't too difficult, but it might take some looking around. Check out a utility like ED-Tool's PvE mission systems to make the process way easier, as it filters for systems that have all their pirate hunting missions pointing to one specific system. Find a mission vending system with a station not too far from the start to avoid long, boring commutes to cash in missions. Then check out the target system for a resource extraction site of your preference, whether it's the cushy protection of high security or the wild fun of hazardous, as long as it's not too far of a trek from the star. Once you found a nice place, you could do a couple runs to build up your reputation with the local factions, settle in, and start hunting pirates to your heart's content. Or until the missions start drying up because they break out into a civil war or something. And if you bring some friends along, you could share each wing-compatible completed mission before cashing them in, and suddenly every pirate you and your wing eliminate is completing multiple missions simultaneously. But that's just for nerds who want to make tons of credits and rack up resources, and there are a million guides out there for that, from fighting to farming.
There's cranberry juice on sale!
I've been bounty hunting since before it was even close to lucrative because, well, it's fun. I just like blowing shit up. Speaking Speaking of blowing shit up, a smart move is to filter out low-level resources from your scanner and leave only the tier 5 stuff that big ships like Anacondas and Corvettes can drop. That way there isn't a sea of little grey icons every time you blow up a ship, and the stuff you might actually want to take the time to cargo scoop is nice and visible. Also, our railguns are especially good at taking out modules. My personal recommendation would be to map the targeting modules control onto your mouse wheel so you can easily find the power plant while fighting a ship. Then, when the shields are down, you can usually tear right through it, and, if you're lucky, it'll cause an insta-death and save you plenty of time. The only other recommendations I can think of are that the best Pirate Massacre missions are saved for when you're allied with a minor faction, so it's worthwhile to grab reputation rewards to power yourself towards those big 20 million plus credit missions. And when you're stacking Massacre missions, make sure you split them among the minor factions offering them. Find the highest paying for each, and then each pirate you eliminate will count for all the missions simultaneously. You can also stack from multiple different stations, even from different systems that are pointing to the same target. The ED Tools PvE mission system utility shows how many systems are pointing to a target, though you need to catch them in at their respective stations after, and personally that's a lot more busy work than I'm prepared to do, even if it's more efficient. And that's about it! You now have all the tools and knowledge necessary to rail every pirate you see. Be the railgunner you always dreamed of. Rail strangers, rail your friends, make railing a family tradition. You know what? I actually forgot to try railguns on my Sidewinder.